laypersons in the Parliament that no matter how simple it appear, that we need ample time to fully appreciate the implications and the significance of any attempt whatsoever to amend the laws of this country. That we need a more reasonable time frame in order to get into the act of changing, amending, and we have had to do so much of this over the last few years. Mr. President, this is a most interesting piece of legislation addressing the question of the eligibility of non-nationals to practice law in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. President, the concepts of liberalization and free market no longer belongs to the realm of economics, for not only tariff barriers seem to be going down, but also legal and judicial barriers are falling. Mr. President, notwithstanding the fact that of the work permit proviso, which enables non-nationals to practice here in our law courts, and furthermore, that legal personnel have been moving with some degree of freedom within the British Commonwealth. The bill seeks to more than clarify. I'm looking at that word clarify in the explanation that accompanies the bill. I think that this bill as it is, in fact I'm speaking on the bill as only a few minutes ago I saw amendments. I have to be forgiven, and all of us, because we got no time at all even to look at amendments, not even enough time to look at the bill itself. The bill seeks, I feel the bill seeks more than to clarify the eligibility for a non-national to practice within the law of Trinidad, to practice law in Trinidad and Tobago. The bill certainly seeks to facilitate and to make the process easier. The barriers have been falling down. We are liberalizing, as I see. I still question, nevertheless, the wisdom of interfering with the Parent Act. That's my problem as a layman. And at the end of this debate, I hope to find good reasons for government's intention to amend the Legal Profession Act of 1986 and open the door, thereby opening the door with greater determination.
With respect to Senator, the Honourable Senator, Mr.
Of all the interest groups in this territory.
Senator Tilak Singh believes vagrancy
ecumenical movement throughout the world.
Because the judicial playing field is not level. Otherwise you never have a bill like this. Sometimes, maybe most of the times, justice favors the wealthy and the influential. And if the state's right of appeal in certain matters will bring justice within the reach of the poor and the weak in our society, then I support the state. And I support this part of the bill.
Senator Kenneth Ramchand requests
exposed to a life of drugs, crime, prostitution, and exploitation at a very early age. And at a conference today held by the Center for Gender and Development Studies at the University of the West Indies, the media are being urged to remain relentless in their efforts to let government, the NGOs, and the general public know the severity of this problem.
Ladies and gentlemen, at times the media has to coax, pressure, or even embarrass the government
with non-governmental organizations and other appropriate agencies engaged in the care and rehabilitation of vagrants, and that the committee submit recommendations to government for its prompt and immediate action. We'll bring you excerpt on the third day of the debate, which began on August 5th. But before that, we bring you notice of several papers that were laid in the lower house. These were the Auditor General's report on the accounts of the Diego Martin Regional.
I want to refer to that resolution that has inspired so much comment from various contributors to the debate. The one which calls for a joint select committee of Parliament to consider the problem rather than a purely government-appointed committee. I suggested the parliamentary committee because this social problem, Mr. President, has proven to be a nightmare for many a government who dared to go it alone. This has been one of the very significant instruments explored by all the parliaments of the Commonwealth. They have been trying to find a way to bridge the gaps and bring together the various groups within a nation's parliament. But we prefer to remain political dwarfs and allow national issues as vagrancy to be juggled in the political lotto basket, where such issues suffer most of the times either from a lack of opposition support or from false government, a sense of false governmental self-sufficiency. If the joint parliamentary committee system cannot bring parliamentary consensus, cooperation, and ultimately unity of purpose, Mr. President, then we must hastily invent some mechanism to devise that necessary objective, especially in a society so diverse. Mr. President, government needs to be advised that whatever method you may adopt to respond to the pain and the anguish, the loneliness and the pathos of the vagrancy world, you must do so with that kind of purpose and determination which produces results. And one of which is, and this is the punchline in the motion, is to get the vagrants off the streets immediately.
With the debate finally over, the proposed amendments were put to the vote. The Senate voted 15 for, 15 against. It was then up to the Honorable Ganesh Ramdial.
Members, there seems to be a tie. Convention has it that when the chair is required to cast a vote in such circumstances, you vote so as to maintain the status quo. And in this case, the status quo would be the original motion, so I must vote no. I shall now propose the original motion.
And the original motion was put to the vote, and again it was 15 for and 15 against. And again the President of the Senate had to vote, voting in favor of the original motion. Well, this brings us to the end of Inside Parliament for today. I'm Keith Telford.
That resolution that has inspired so much comment from various contributors to the debate, the one which calls for a joint select committee of Parliament to consider the problem rather than a purely government-appointed committee. I suggested the parliamentary committee because this social problem, Mr. President, has proven to be a nightmare for many a government who dared to go it alone. This has been one of the very significant instruments explored by all the parliaments of the Commonwealth. They have been trying to find a way to bridge the gaps and bring together the various groups within a nation's parliament. But we prefer to remain political dwarfs and allow national issues as vagrancy to be juggled in the political lotto basket, where such issues suffer most of the times either from a lack of opposition support or from false government, a sense of false governmental self-sufficiency. If the joint parliamentary committee system cannot bring parliamentary consensus, cooperation, and ultimately unity of purpose, Mr. President, then we must hastily invent some mechanism to devise that necessary objective, especially in a society so diverse as ours. Mr. President, government needs to be advised that whatever method you may adopt to respond to the pain and the anguish, the loneliness and the pathos of the vagrancy world, you must do so with that kind of purpose and determination which produces results. And one of which is, and this is the punchline in the motion, is to get the vagrants off the streets immediately.
With the debate finally over, the proposed amendments were put to the vote. The Senate voted 15 for, 15 against. It was then up to the Honorable Ganesh Ramdial.
Members, there seems to be a tie. Convention has it that when the chair is required to cast a vote in such circumstances, you vote so as to maintain the status quo. And in this case, the status quo would be the original motion, so I must vote no. I shall now propose the original motion.
And the original motion was put to the vote, and again it was 15 for and 15 against. And again the President of the Senate had to vote, voting in favor of the original motion. Well, this brings us to the end of Inside Parliament for today.
Clause 6 concerning tenure of office contains, Mr. President, what I think might just be one of the finest provisions in the bill, particularly 6.2, which reads, no person appointed under 4B3 shall be appointed for more than 2 consecutive terms. Is this breaking new grounds when it comes to boards? And this is why this has struck me as one of the finest provisions of the bill. Is this a provision in order that there will be greater participation in the life and work of this board? Is this provision going to guard against office monopoly? When the debate on the Land Surveyors Bill began on Tuesday, the 17th of September, 1996, one of the senators lamented the fact that there is a shortage of land surveyors in Trinidad and Tobago, you will recall. How come? How come this senator is lamenting that we have a shortage of land surveyors today? I have been informed, sir, that the first batch of students graduating with the BSc in land surveying from the University of the West Indies was in 1986. Mr. President, between 1986 and 1996, there were 114 Trinidad and Tobago nationals who graduated from the University of the West Indies with their BSc in land surveying. And yet there are persons, and that senator is quite correct, there are many who have been asking, how come today we have a shortage of land surveyors?
Clause 6, subsection 2. I think the Honorable Senator was very pleased to see such a clause within the framework of the bill. And if I understand correctly, he's advocating that a similar principle should be adopted as far as state boards are concerned. And in response to the query raised by the Honorable Senator here, this clause, clause 6, subsection 2, is designed, the intent of this clause is primarily to guard against office monopoly. That is what it is designed to do, sir, as I understand. Senator Tilak Singh referred to the 114 graduates who came out of the university since 1986, between 86 and 96. And Honorable Sir, Act number 19 of 1952 never took into account the land survey graduates. And this is precisely what this bill is all about, this present bill. To take into consideration the grievances and the suffering of the land surveying graduates. This is what this bill is meant to do, sir, in part. So that the present framework, the present development of the profession, we are now taking on board the land surveying graduates.
My contention is that the real problem may not be with the importers and the distributors. Mr. President, the real problem can be found within the halls of the Ministry of Education and the halls of the educational institution in Trinidad and Tobago. That is where the cleanup must begin. It is very important. That is where it must begin, not in the bookstores, and not those fellas who selling used books under the stores, and not the printers in England. Not at all. The cleanup must start within the Ministry of Education. It's most interesting, eh? The last report, is it by the Auditor General? Sometime earlier this year, where the Auditor General listed a certain amount of thefts. A certain amount of thefts were listed in the last report of the Auditor General that was laid in this Honorable House. And I must look at it again. But I am absolutely certain, and it tells me something, that heading the list of all the different ministries and places where there are thefts that he could point out, the Ministry of Education was #1. Look at that again. You talk about racket involving school principals, racket involving teachers, racket involving supervisors, officials of the ministry. This is what we have. You talk about book vultures. Book vultures have had a field day over the years, and the people who suffer the most have been the poor. The ball is in your court, Honorable Minister, and we hope and pray that this motion will be an incentive for you and your government to do something on behalf of the tens of thousands who have suffered and the many who are still suffering.
Independent Senator Martin Daly.
And as Errol Pilgrim reports, the senator got an equally strong response from Foreign Affairs Minister Ralph Maraj.
The matter being debated had nothing to do with the shooting this week by the Venezuelan military of Trinidad trawler captain Ralpheus Lewis, nor was it about the mysterious killing in the Gulf of another fisherman, Anthony Allen, 2 weeks ago. The item at hand was a motion by Foreign Minister Ralph Maraj seeking diplomatic privileges and immunities for the recently established Association of Caribbean States, of which both this country and Venezuela are members. But independent Senator Daniel Tiloksing made it his business to ensure that what he calls the Caribbean version of the Gulf War did not escape the attention of the upper house.
I support the call today, Mr. President, to free the Columbus Channel and the Gulf from acts of aggression, piracy, and to bring to an end our version of the Gulf War. Mr. President, this matter must be addressed at the next meeting of the ACS.
But Mr. Maraj says he does not think the recent incidents in the Gulf necessitate any ACS intervention at the present time. He says such a multilateral approach is always an option, but the government is first seeking to have the situation resolved bilaterally between Trinidad.
Before we move on to the next stage of tabling this report.
In order to be made into law, the bill to emerge
Incidents with our fishermen, which involves an ACS partner, and the fact that industrial unrest impacts on our international image.
Industrial uneasiness, Mr. President, produces instability which will hurt our domestic well-being and our international image. This is what we're talking about. The point is, we must set our house in order if we are to qualify to play an important role in hemispheric leadership. Mr. President, I want to close by leaving a few questions with the Honorable Minister. The first one is, who will finance the construction of the building to house the ACS headquarters in Port of Spain? What will be the cost? Already I know Trinidad and Tobago has donated the land on Lower Richmond Street for that project. The next question, what will be the nation's contribution to the ACS budget? And what about the contribution of participating countries? And the third one, Cuba chairs one of the ACS committees. How will the USA interpret this in the light of Helms-Burton law and our application and interest to join NAFTA? Which is given priority by the Trinidad and Tobago government, ACS allegiance or membership in NAFTA? Will we be disadvantaged because of Cuba, since both the past administration and the present have shown determined interest in the NAFTA grouping? What is the priority? Mr. President, I thank you.
In recent times,
to play an important role in hemispheric leadership. Mr. President, I want to close by leaving a few questions with the Honorable Minister. The first one is, who will finance the construction of the building to house the ACS headquarters in Port of Spain? What will be the cost? Already I know Trinidad and Tobago has donated the land on Lower Richmond Street for that project. The next question, what will be the nation's contribution to the ACS budget? And what about the contribution of participating countries? And the third one, Cuba chairs one of the ACS committees. How will the USA interpret this in the light of Helms-Burton law and our application and interest to join NAFTA? Which is given priority by the Trinidad and Tobago government, ACS allegiance or membership in NAFTA? Will we be disadvantaged because of Cuba, since both the past administration and the present have shown determined interest in the NAFTA grouping? What is the priority? Mr. President, I thank you.
in recent times, as a result of the visit of the Prime Minister to Venezuela, we
have of tabling this report. It is very unfortunate, I think, that such responsible persons who have been carefully selected by both houses in a very important matter like this should be absent at their last meeting when, as a member of the committee, the proposer of the resolution is saying some very important matters were outstanding.
There can be very few issues that have come before.
Clause 5 of the bill, with its provision for emergency treatment, is significant and raises a question that can't be deferred. Mr. President, since this bill was discussed in the other place, and there have been press reports and so on and popular interpretation of the whole question of emergency treatment for accident victims, there is the popular interpretation, and I would ask the Honorable Attorney General in his response and winding up to address this question. There are many of us out there, since this bill has been debated, who get the impression that insurance companies will pay in advance for emergency treatment of accident victims. I would ask for further clarification on this.
Mr. President, what this figure is intended to deal with is the sum of one
ministry because of a delayed program. So the question I'm asking myself, if this $10.6 million could have been diverted to another ministry, as it was done, why was it not used within the health ministry? The second area of concern, as I said, is the Ministry of Works and Transport. An additional $41.8 million, Mr. President, diverted to the Ministry of Works and Transport. I'm glad previous speakers spoke about, made mention of the rural access roads and bridges program. So you're telling us, Mr. President, you allocated 19 million for access roads and bridges program. You want 41.8 million more. That's plenty of money, you know. You know, I want to ask. It's a question that the government has to ask based on the ROI concept. Is the government getting value for that kind of expenditure? It is very important.
I want to go on to talk about the Ministry of Health.
Reverend Daniel Tilak Singh has accused the opposition PNM of laying the groundwork for the proposal by the present government to legalize casino gambling. In a strong condemnation of the proposal, he says it will further undermine the work ethic and legitimize laziness. Reverend Tilak Singh was the first independent speaker at this morning's resumption of the budget debate in the Senate. Errol Pilgrim has details.
A Presbyterian minister, Reverend Tilak Singh, has added his name to the growing list of religious leaders who have denounced the government's casino proposal. But he chides the PNM for also criticizing the move, pointing out that it was the PNM administration that went about transforming Trinidad and Tobago into a gambling society.
The groundwork was well laid by the past PNM administration. And you continue their policy as you promised when you won elections, and you're doing it well. In this debate over these weeks, Mr. President, the PNM can hardly criticize casinos, for their Lucky Luciano became luckless Luciano at the last elections. It is a case of the pot calling the kettle black. Yes, the past administration pointed the way to casinos. And through the past few years, Mr. President, there have been an estimated 15 houses with illegal casino-type gambling flourishing in Trinidad, and no attempt was made by the past administration to suppress them.
Reverend Tilak Singh says by seeking to legalize casino gambling, the government is undermining its noble vision in the 1997 budget to re-establish family values. He says there's no need for the dubious revenues from casino gambling in a country that is so richly blessed with natural resources and with tourist attractions that are unique to Trinidad and Tobago. And as far as Tobago is concerned, he feels that there should be consultation with the Tobago House of Assembly before casinos are introduced in the sister island. Describing the budget as a luck and chance budget, Reverend Tilak Singh compares it to foreign used cars, the national football team, and the West Indies cricket team.
President, failure by the government to give assurance as to the fate of the TT dollar makes the budget as a foreign used car with a brand new PBB number plate. It looks good and smells new, but it holds no guarantee. For its engine can break down at any time, anywhere, and no one will be responsible. Or it is like the national football team, Mr. President, full of foreign used players, and we can't even go to France. Or, Mr. President, it is like the West Indies cricket team in Australia, full of stars but no twinkle.
He suggests that the float of the Trinidad and Tobago dollar should be properly managed and that every effort be made to get the exchange rate down to $5 to the US dollar for starters. Errol Pilgrim, TTT News.
Well, in the midst of what
team, Mr. President, full of foreign used players, and we can't even go to France. Or, Mr. President, it is like the West Indies cricket team in Australia, full of stars but no twinkle.
Seriously, though, he says it failed to address what he feels is the most critical issue facing the country right now, a weakening of the exchange rate.
Only luck and chance, you say? There's too much at stake to gamble, Mr. President, with the dollar value. We must regroup our energies and not surrender completely to the whims and fancies of the open market system. That system has too much gaming, and this is a budget of gaming. Too much luck and chance.
And despite the open market system, he thinks government should address more directly the slide in the dollar.
Mr. President, the budget relies on luck and chance casino type saying, given the underlying strength of the economy, there is no reason why the rate should not stabilize around current levels. End of quote. This is guesswork. So simplistic and so undisguised.
Senator Ken Ramchand, too, wants some answers with regard to...
They say we're going to offer you cheap prices. The most interesting, cheaper prices for non-prescription drugs. When all of us know, all of us in this chamber and out of this chamber too, that on a daily basis, prices in supermarkets seem to be creeping up. The game they're playing to mislead the government, but there has been a strong persuasive lobby of supermarkets, especially their easy victory, you remember? You remember when we were talking about selling alcohol on Sundays and public holidays? Man, they ignore every religion in Trinidad. Supermarkets are their own way with the government. I want to know why. You know? No supermarket, the government is giving in again. You know? If prices, the question is, if prices for non-prescription drugs are a problem, if this is a problem in Trinidad, then why doesn't government get after the pharmacy board and tell them clean up their act or something like that? And what about the Prices Commission? Do you have to change, do something like this to disturb something that has been working? Mr. President, the pharmacist is a specialized profession. It costs approximately $114,000 per year for pharmacology students at Mount Hope Medical School. Furthermore, it's most interesting, do you know that students' fees in pharmacology, student fees are subsidized by the government? How ironical for the government to weaken a profession that has always been there and a profession that you have supported and you continue to support. Mr. President, there are approximately 580 qualified pharmacists in Trinidad and Tobago, and with a spread of about 270 pharmacies across the country. Mr. President, our community needs the pharmacy. This is important. And government must preserve this important institution. This is a specialized activity. And we must listen to the plea of the pharmacists who see their profession as being threatened. It's not a question of monopoly. They foresee the closure of several pharmacies if they are reduced to selling only prescription drugs. I see this being possible too.
The over-the-counter drugs also came up. And I want to assure this Honorable House that we're not talking about a whole host of drugs. They're very basic. I've been in consultation with the Minister of Finance, Minister of Health. He had said there may be no more than 6 or 7 things, but it is a question of convenience. I really hope that the furor that was started by the pharmacists would die when they begin to realize that we're really going to restrict it to very few. Again, that legislation has to come here, and you have an opportunity to influence it one way or the other.
Senator Kenneth Ramchand took the floor next. He too spoke against casinos, the playway mentality, and against tourism.
Spoke in the Senate today. Under debate was a bill amending the Gambling and Betting Act to regulate shopping contests run by merchandisers. Errol Pilgrim has this report.
Senator Tilak Singh's warning in the Senate comes amid continuing speculation over so far unconfirmed reports that the man whom Prime Minister Bassir Pandey is poised to name as the successor to President Nur Hassan Ali is none other than Minister Extraordinaire A.N.R. Robinson. While he does not mention Mr. Robinson's name, Senator Tilak Singh chides the government for unashamedly promoting what he calls a gambling mindset in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mr. President, I hope with this mindset, I hope that government does not gamble with the noble office of the presidency of our nation, and that it is not settled on the political roulette table, but instead that we pray for God's guidance and wisdom in this and every other matter. Mr. President, Karl Marx saw in his society, the society of his day, he saw religion as the opiate of the people. Gambling is fast becoming the opiate of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, so eagerly used by the state as a solution to many problems.
Senator Tilak Singh sought to associate the new bill amending the Gambling and Betting Act with the government's proposal to introduce casino gambling. But Finance Minister Brian Quaitung makes it clear to the Senate that the bill has
to fit this bill against the landscape of crime in Trinidad and Tobago.
Will this bill go down well with its focus on minor offenses? Not a bit of it. Mr. President, this bill, seen in the context of growing social displeasure against social offenders, is nothing more than playing dolly house with crime. Crime is not to be treated with kids' gloves, such as the bill proposes. Mr. President, many will scoff at this bleeding heart bill. Our people are unwilling, Mr. President, to tolerate even small offenders.
Senator Tilak Singh said the society is fed up and disillusioned with offenders who have disrupted the communal peace and inflicted so much pain on law-abiding citizens. Sharon Hamilton-Cudjoe, TDT News.
And Ruskin Mark has joined us on the set.
Citizens have for years protested against that 15% tax as a disincentive to savings. And I hope that in the near future, that tax will be completely removed.
I would simply point out that we're now having a debate going on.
Kits and ask the government to encourage people to use CNG. Finbar Ganga, Minister of Energy, the sector which provides
concerns on the functioning of the ADB point to the need for an appraisal of its place within the agricultural context. Mr. President, when we consider the enormous accumulated debts on the bank's bad pay list, those non-performing loans, a press report, and I refer to the Trinidad Guardian of the 16th of October 1997, which quotes a former CEO of the bank saying that non-performing loan portfolio as being valued at $230 million. Staggering and unbelievable, I say. Mr. President, well, so far nobody has challenged that or corrected that.
Describing the situation as a case of morality gone crazy, Reverend Tilak Singh poses several questions about possible financial irregularities in the operations of the ADB.
Is it true that a debtor owed the ADB $4.2 million and the bank settled for a mere $1.5 million as settlement? Or another had his $2 million loan quietly settled for a merely $400,000? Or another borrowed $5 million, and it is wishful thinking, Mr. President, that he will see the face of Taurus? You talk about different strokes for different folks, and you're telling us keep it confidential? Well, that is morality gone crazy.
Reverend Tilak Singh says there must be a clear redefining of the functions of the ADB. Errol Pilgrim, TDT News.
Groups. Speaking during a debate in the Senate yesterday afternoon on a bill seeking to establish a Consumer Guidance Council, Senator Tilak Singh first raised the issue of the recent $20 million refurbishing of the Usine St. Madeleine sugar factory by the Indian firm Danpur, which went down within hours of being commissioned.
For a large consumer as this state enterprise to spend $20 million on services, is there a warranty? This goes beyond the austerizer in our kitchen. Is there a warranty? Is there an insurance coverage? Is there consumer protection at that level where so much money is used? Are there contractual commitments from Danpur Engineering?
The senator then took issue with the recent $30 million rice shipment from India.
Was the rice insured? Are the ship owners liable? Do we pay $30 million upfront on an international market, face great losses, Mr. Vice President, with little redress? I want to ask this question.
is our power in a situation like this only limited to the firing of our own CEOs and management teams? Is that all the power we have in a situation like this? Is that all the satisfaction we will get after investing 30 million? Fire the CEOs, fire the management team, the board. Is this all?
Senator Tilak Singh also suggested that the government seek some compensation from the Curacao firm which undertook recent repairs on the MF Panorama at a cost of 12 million TT dollars. Well, displeasure yesterday among members of the
along with a new vice principal, which relegated Ms. Chablal to teaching the Standard 2 class. But the parents
will liaison with the PTAs in the school. We will not have this problem we have in here today.
Chamber, distracting the chamber and prompting a warning from the acting president.
They'll have to have you removed from the chamber.
The UE workers' plight did not go unnoticed as the Senate debated a bill to approve spending in excess of $698 million for too long and had disrupted the lives of students and the country.
And this is one time I will appeal for all those interest groups, all concerned, whether they be the unions, those of the strikers, the university administration, that they all should get together to find a solution for this problem that has been protracted for too long. And I dare say, Mr. Vice President, that if governmental intervention is necessary, that this should be delayed no longer. 8, someone is writing, a businessman, the Honorable Attorney General must be highly commended, I quote, highly commended for taking up the challenge in making the issuance of bounce checks a clear criminal offense punishable by fines. And he says, I humbly make the following suggestion to our Attorney General on behalf of all of us who are victims of con artists and thieves who issue bad checks. Please make the measure for the fine and imprisonments of bad check writers a retroactive one. Please put it back about 5 years so that those of us who have been wronged can at least get back some of the money of which we have been ripped off.
If there is a problem with a check, it is very rare that you are communicated.
For Trinidad and Tobago to be one of the 11 countries for vaccine trials.
I don't know who selected those 11 countries, but it was certainly not the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Trinidad and Tobago is being considered by other people to be one of the possible sites for vaccine trials. We still have to give the permission for that to happen.
Yeah, I would like to know, well, who are the other people? It seems as though the impression, sorry, Mr. Vice President, the impression here is that this matter is settled already. Trinidad and Tobago is one of the sites.
And I want to assure you, Honorable Senator, that that is not so. We have given no permission as far as HIV vaccine trials is concerned. As I said, there are organizations, the UNAIDS and other organizations that are interested in conducting vaccine trials. They are looking at different territories. They have looked at Trinidad and said that Trinidad is a possible site. We still have to give the permission for that to happen. And we have given no such permission as yet. We have appointed an ethics committee to look at all the issues and then make a recommendation to Cabinet.
Of the tireless Attorney General in this regard, but he had a number of concerns. One had to do with Trinidad and Tobago pulling out of the convention without bringing the matter to Parliament. He asked the question if, when the country had acceded to the various conventions, had it been done through the Parliament.
Other governments in Trinidad and Tobago, when they had to accede to conventions, they did not bring it to the Parliament.
But beyond the approval or non-approval of the Parliament, Senator Tilak Singh wanted to know how will the global family of nations react to this country's departure from the convention. He wanted to know also if the international conventions to which this country was a signatory are now obsolete. And what of, he asked, the comfort zone afforded this country knowing that an international organization would have overview of our conduct in this vital area of human rights.
I most respectfully suggest, Mr. Vice President, that government reconsider its decision to withdraw this nation, not the government as such, but the nation, withdraws that you have withdrawn the nation from such conventions, that decision be reconsidered, and instead begin a lobby. I haven't read much about this, that you started a lobby for change within these conventions so that such bodies will hasten their handling of referrals to them. If the time factor is our problem.
But the Attorney General was not daunted. He pointed to the example of the United States. He says that country
had been ratified by Parliament, and if so, why was the decision to withdraw not been brought to Parliament? Mr. Maraj did not respond to that directly, but instead issued the challenge. And the opposition says it may very well take him up on it. Contacted this evening, acting political leader of the PNM, Ken Valley, said the party is firm in its position that the decision to withdraw from the human rights conventions is wrong. And he says if the
had been ratified by Parliament, and if so, why was the decision to withdraw not been brought to Parliament? Mr. Maraj did not respond to that directly, but instead issued the challenge, and the opposition...
So get rid of the mosquito on my place. When I'm finished here, is no bush for mosquitoes to hide in. No water...
Courage, honesty, and integrity in John in their fight for the controversial John John Towers. In a recent Senate debate, Senator Tilak Singh called on the government to allocate the tower apartments only to the people of John John.
Trent at WASA, ACCA at BWIA, and PowerGen. Reverend Tilak Singh was speaking on a finance bill debate in the Senate.
They are coming to use what we have and develop what we have, just as Severn Trent did. Mr. Vice President, you remember ACCA? He and his boys reaped a harvest for themselves, and they ran the planes on PH, man, and they left BWI almost grounded. Mr. Vice President, you remember PowerGen? I still talking about post office, you know. Mr. Vice President, PowerGen continued to rake in millions from our faithful power turbines on Wrightson Road. I remember when they said that those old turbines are too tired, they're 25 years old, and we fell for that.
Disappointed with this problem with the cricket board and with the Players Association. I think we should see it as a problem of regional unity. Federation failed during Dr. Eric Williams' time because of this regional jealousy, and we see it again propping up. West Indian cricket team is the only team we have that we could truly boast of a Caribbean unity. CARICOM is just a mere show. We have no West Indian football team. We have no West Indian hockey team. We have no West Indian volleyball team. Cricket is the only sport, and I think we should back that because it displays our regional unity. And
let me ask you, where are you seeing regional jealousy in this?
We have 4 Trinidadians on that team. Every island would like to have 4 or 5 of their players.
But where does that come into the impasse? I mean, who's jealous of whom? We had 2 Trinidadians who voted to fire Lara.
Well, they had to go along with the crowd.
No, they never did before. So where's the regional jealousy? I just want to get a perspective.
Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, every island would love to see their players there. So it's a kind of, it's a something on the, not on the surface, but it's underlying. And I feel that the other islands, there's this bickering still going around, and it has been plaguing us for years. I think we need to see beyond the issue of Lara and Hooper, and we have to stop this Lara bashing, this Trinidad bashing, and we need to see ourselves as a unified islands, you know, not just separate.
Okay.
The independent senator said the country needs healing, reconciliation, and a stronger sense of community with mutual respect between the government and the media.
Available to the other side.
Which was opened to motorists. Reverend Tilak Singh tells fellow senators that the highway project was made possible through a $120 million grant from the European Union, with this country contributing a mere $7 million.
They are giving us a grant to build that road. And almost all the motorists who are using that road have condemned the little piece that has been opened. It is a disaster story, and not because it's a gift. We're going to get more gifts from them. This morning we heard about another gift. Sorry, earlier on this afternoon, we heard about another gift. The gift of an expert that is coming here. No, he's here already. Now the gift of 120 million to build a road. We are the supervisors of that. We are the custodians of that gift. And that's a disaster story, the reconstruction of that road. And I think we need to have, as a government, an immediate inquiry into the reconstruction of that road.
And staying with that issue, motorists on the recently opened portion of the
expression of the state's concern and sympathy for victims.
The next
population about what really happened at the Prime Minister's residence the day Corporal Anthony Caesar shot and killed Commander Penko and shot Heather Wilshire before killing himself. Rosemary Sand reports.
The airwaves with a lengthy statement expressing outrage at the calls by two independent senators for them to come clean on the shootings at the Prime Minister's residence.
The two senators, by their irresponsible statements, were given legitimacy to speculation in two newspapers that was the cause of great distress to the grieving family of the officer who was murdered. That sort of speculation has since been proven to be just speculation and nothing more.
Well, then if that is speculation, covering several days of sharing information with the public, if that is speculation, well then the question that I want to ask and we need to ask as a nation, where is the information that is not speculative and why is it taking so long in coming?
In response, Tilak Singh stuck to his position that the public often has to wait far too long for the truth on matters of national importance.
Is it that the truth has an official face? And also, truth has an unofficial face. The unofficial face is the face that we see every morning at breakfast time when you open the newspaper and on evenings when you listen to the news. How are we going to harmonize this as far as public information is concerned? If you as a government think that you have the truth that is official, how do you harmonize that with the truth that is unofficial?
But he says the criticism from the government does not intimidate him, once again praising the media for its work in keeping the population informed on the tragedy at the Prime Minister's residence. The first salvo from the government to the independent senators was a letter dispatched by the Prime Minister himself to Senator Diana Mahabir Wyatt, calling for her to present the evidence to back up her statement to the Senate.
Senator Mahabir Wyatt's allegations are unfounded and unfair and did great discredit to the Senate, where responsible conduct is expected of all members.
But her response to the letter is that she was simply doing...
Mark, who described their statements on the recent shootings at the Prime Minister's residence as irresponsible. The Prime Minister has since written to Senator Mahabir Wyatt calling on her to provide proof that government is attempting to cover up evidence surrounding the shooting. Curtis Williams.
It is most unfortunate that Senator Mahabir Wyatt and Senator Daniel Tilak Singh, who echoed Senator Mahabir Wyatt's sentiments, chose to ignore the very serious obligation that should apply to all entities, the media included, to avoid speculation in such matters. More than that, the two senators, by their irresponsible statements, were given legitimacy to speculation in two newspapers that was the cause of great distress to the grieving family of the officer who was murdered.
At center of the controversy, 2 newspaper articles which delved into the circumstances surrounding the murder-suicide at the Prime Minister's residence, and allegations by the 2 senators that government's failure to release the findings of both the police and military investigations is an attempt to hide the truth. While last evening the government responded by insisting that it was not in a position to release the reports before the coroner's inquest, and by sending a copy of the letter written to Mrs. Wyatt to the President. Contacted today, Mrs. Mahabir Wyatt said she had already responded in writing to the Prime Minister. She said, "The Prime Minister has his job to do, and I have mine." Senator Tilak Singh says he is not worried by the letter which was sent to the President, since he still enjoys freedom of speech. He says if the comments are based on speculation, then where are the reports and truth? The independent senator adds that both the media and the population are in the dark about the events.
I would want to say that there are many persons in this country who celebrate the freedom of the press and the media, the work that the media have been doing on behalf of the masses of this country. And I think that we need in this particular issue to thank the media and express our appreciation for the investigative work of the various arms of the media.
Senator Tilak Singh says the country has to guard jealously the freedom of the media and pray that it continues. Curtis Williams, reporting for TV.
Pilgrim.
It is during her contribution to the government's Freedom of Information Bill that Minister Prasad Bisesa refers to what she calls the Penko tragedy. Her reference to the tragedy and to the cover-up allegations of the 2 independent senators is in response to the opposition PNM's denunciation of the Freedom of Information Bill as a threat to democracy and truth.
And Mr. Deputy Speaker, prime example of truth being under threat is this whole...
Mahabir Wyatt is now out of the country and so missed the attack fired her way by National Security Minister Joseph Theodore, who accused her of legitimizing media speculation and rumor mongering over the murder-suicide tragedy at the Prime Minister's residence.
Senator Mahabir Wyatt and Senator Daniel Tilak Singh have done serious disservice to themselves and to this institution. The honorable thing for members guilty of such conduct should be immediate admission of error and prompt apologies to this institution and to the individuals and institutions to whom
Is a ministerial statement properly to be used for one member to castigate the conduct of another?
I would permit him to respond in the way he is responding.
Senator Theodore said after 2 investigations and 1 month to the date of the shooting, the government is no clearer on what happened.
the government was in no position then, nor is the government in a position now to supply the reason for Lance Corporal Caesar's actions.
And once again, he insisted the government has told the truth as it knew it.
The people who issued those reports, myself included, told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
The opposition benches were furious.
I know they are trying hard to get rid of all the threats and intimidation.
The senator has made a statement to the effect that we want to get rid of Senator Diana Mahabir Wyatt. I think that is totally out of...
I think the minister is correct, Senator. Statements like that, please refrain from making them. I think this morning you seem to be very, very emotional.
And a promise of protection for Mahabir Wyatt.
And I want to say to Senator Diana Mahabir, we are going to protect her from on this side as best as we could. But I give Senator Mahabir my personal assurance that I will protect her from these people because I personally not afraid of any one of them on that side.
Rosemary Sant, TV6 News.
Meanwhile, Senator Tilak Singh is dismissing the government's demand for an apology from him and Mrs. Mahabir Wyatt as downright impertinent.
All for an apology, which I think might just be impertinent for him to call for an apology because my conscience is clear and I am concerned about the truth. My conscience is clear and I have a feeling I speak on behalf of all the independents.